Off the coast of California, beyond a wide belt of open Pacific water, a chain of islands rises from the sea. They are close enough to see from the mainland on a clear day, and far enough that the sea always stands between. Waves break against their cliffs the way they always have, patient and indifferent, working the rock down a grain at a time. On one of those islands, a man lay buried in a canyon wall, and the ocean was already pulling him out. His bones are roughly 13,000 years old. He reached this island when the world was still deep in an ice age. And here is the part of it that refuses to sit still. A bridge to this island has never existed. Not once ever. Not during the ice age, not before it, and not at the coldest hour of all, when the oceans dropped to their lowest. Whoever left those bones behind did not walk here. They crossed open water 13,000 years ago, and something built by hand carried them. That single fact quietly rearranges the whole story of how people first reached the Americas, and it has never once been comfortable. The island is Santa Rosa, one of the Channel Islands, sitting off the southern California coast in cold, restless, moving water. It is a place of grass, wind, and canyons that cut down through the island like knife wounds toward the sea. One of those canyons is called Arlington. It is where this story begins, in the wall of a gully in 1959. In that year, a man named Phil Orr was out walking the island on behalf of the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. Orr was a museum man, a patient collector of the island's past, and he had been working his way through these canyons for years. What caught him was not a monument or a tomb. It was something pale, coming out of the dirt on its own. Two human thigh bones, femurs, weathering out of the wall of Arlington Canyon, 11 meters below the top of the bank. 11 meters of packed earth stood above them. Whatever had put them there had done it a very long time ago. The bones were not being buried by anyone. They were being unburied, slowly, by rain and runoff cutting the canyon steadily deeper. Left alone another season or two, they would have washed down the gully and out into the open sea, unrecorded and gone forever. The island had been holding those two bones for 13,000 years, quietly, without witnesses, and it had just started letting go. What Orr did next is the reason this story exists at all, and it was not remotely the obvious choice for a collector. He did not pull the bones out. In 1960, he cut the ground away around them and took the whole block. An irregular lump of earth, roughly 60 by 40 by 33 centimeters, with the bones still sealed somewhere inside it unseen. He wrapped it in a plaster jacket, the way a museum moves a fossil it does not yet dare to open. Before the plaster went on, he took exactly one thing out of it. A sample of the bone, set carefully aside for dating later. Later meant a method that did not yet exist well enough to trust, or was saving evidence for a future science. That is a strange kind of patience. A man packing a question in plaster because the answer had not been invented. The block went back to the museum, and there it sat, holding whatever it held, while the decades ran past outside its walls. The block was opened properly only in 1993, in a laboratory taken apart by hand, fragment by careful fragment. Inside the crumbled block, both femurs came out of the fragments at last, the same pair Orr had watched weathering from the wall. And there was something else in there with them. A third piece of bone, which nobody could identify with any real confidence. It was left exactly where it lay, in place, undisturbed, because an unread thing is worth far more intact than guessed at. So the full inventory of this ancient Californian is small, and it is honest. 2 thigh bones, 1 unidentified fragment, nothing else at all. No skull, no jaw, no pelvis, no hands that might have held a paddle. 2 legs and a great deal of silence. The find had a name almost immediately, Arlington Springs Man, named for the canyon and for the spring that still runs through it. But a name is not an age. Bones do not arrive with a date written on them, however old they look. And this particular pair of bones was about to spend decades refusing to say anything at all to anyone who asked. When the laboratories finally asked how old the man from Arlington Canyon was, the answer came back as a flat refusal. The first serious attempt came in 1989 at the University of Arizona, a laboratory that knew exactly what it was doing. They took Orr's carefully saved bone sample, ran it through the standard radiocarbon process, and got no age out of it whatsoever. The verdict was blunt: the bone was undateable. Not old, not young, not even ambiguous, simply unable to answer the question asked. The problem had a number attached to it. The bone held 0.053% nitrogen, which is almost nothing at all. Nitrogen is the fingerprint of collagen, the protein scaffolding threaded through living bone, and radiocarbon dating reads collagen, not the mineral around it. 13,000 years in a wet island canyon had eaten it away. The scaffolding was gone. The bone was, chemically speaking, hollow. To be sure, this was not one laboratory's bad day. The sample was checked independently by a specialist named De Niro. His answer matched: the material was unusable. Two separate readings agreed that the man from Arlington Canyon could not be dated. That is a quiet kind of loss. The oldest thing on the whole island, and it had nothing left in it to say. And it explains why so much of American archaeology moves on cautious feet. The evidence does not care about the questions asked of it. Bone is a bargain with time. It looks solid, permanent, honest. Inside, it is a sponge that groundwater slowly rinses out. Water carries humates, dark acids leached out of decaying plants, and they soak into old bone the way ink soaks paper. Those humates carry their own carbon, from their own time and their own plants, and radiocarbon cannot tell whose carbon it is reading. So the bone was not simply empty. It was contaminated, its little remaining protein tangled up with carbon borrowed from other centuries. Dating it in that state would not produce a wrong answer. It would produce a confident wrong answer, which is worse. The laboratory had done the honorable thing. It said no, and for a while, that seemed to be the end of it. What changed was not the bone. The bone was exactly as dead as before. What changed was the chemistry aimed at it. A specialist in difficult bone, Thomas Stafford, took the problem on, and his whole approach was to stop trusting the sample entirely. Instead of dating whatever the bone happened to contain, he set out to strip it back down to what was genuinely original. The method runs the sample through a resin, called XAD, that strips the humates away and leaves the original collagen. What survives that treatment is very small. A few molecules of the man himself, cleaned of everything that seeped into him later. It is the difference between listening to a crowded room and listening to one voice inside it. Stafford wanted only the voice. And on the sample known simply as B, the bone finally spoke, after decades of saying nothing at all to anybody. 10,960 radiocarbon years, give or take 80. A real measurement from a bone that had been written off. Radiocarbon years are not calendar years. The atmosphere's carbon has drifted over time, so the raw number always has to be corrected. Corrected against that curve, the number lands at roughly 13,000 calendar years before the present. A very long silence, finally broken. And then, because one clock is never quite enough, the block of Earth handed over a second one, entirely by accident. Sealed in the same lump of ground was the jaw of a mouse. Not any mouse. An extinct island deer mouse. It has a formal name, Peromyscus nesodites, an island deer mouse, and it is extinct, gone from the world completely and permanently. Its jaw dated to 11,490 radiocarbon years, plus or minus 70, a second reading from the same Earth. Here is the wrinkle. The mouse's tiny jaw had held its chemistry better than the leg bones of a grown human. Bone survival is not about size or importance. It is about chemistry, water, and luck, and the mouse simply had better luck. The mouse gives the layer an upper bracket, a ceiling on the age, a second independent voice speaking from inside the same block. But it also raises an honest possibility the team put on the page themselves, and it is not a comfortable one. The human bones may have been moved. A stream can pick up a bone and lay it down in older ground. If that happened, the man is younger than the layer that held him, and the date drifts honestly out of focus. This is not a scandal. It is a caveat printed by the same people who published the number, which is how it should work. Still, roughly 13,000 years is what the bone itself says, cleaned, measured, and bracketed by the jaw of an extinct mouse. Which brings the story to the sentence that gets this find wrong more often than any other, all over the internet. Arlington Springs man is not the oldest evidence of people in America. That claim is wrong, and the paper never makes it. What the paper says carefully, every single time, is bones, femurs, human remains. It never once reaches for the bigger word. Because older evidence exists, and it is not bone. At White Sands, people left footprints pressed into the mud of a lake. Those prints date to roughly 23,000 years, a full 10,000 years deeper in time than the man from Arlington Canyon. So the honest title is narrower and better. These are the oldest well-dated human bones on the continent. Bones are not footprints. And with the age settled as well as it can be, the mystery quietly changes shape, because the date was never the hard part. The hard part is the water. It was there 13,000 years ago. It is there now. It was always there. To see why, the islands have to be put back the way the Ice Age left them, which is not how they look now. During the coldest stretch, enormous volumes of the planet's water sat locked up in ice sheets, standing on land, not in the sea. Water that leaves the ocean has to come from somewhere. Sea level fell, worldwide, and coastlines walked outward into the deep. Around the Channel Islands, that falling water did something dramatic. It uncovered the shallow shelf that had always separated the northern islands. 4 islands stopped being 4. San Miguel, Santa Rosa, Santa Cruz, and Anacapa merged together into one long continuous body of land. It has a name of its own, given to it by geologists, rather than by anyone who ever actually walked on it: Santarosae. Santarosae ran roughly 125 kilometers end to end. A genuine island landmass, not a scatter of rocks in the swell. Grass, canyons, running streams, and a whole Ice Age world along a shoreline that no longer exists anywhere on a modern map. If a land bridge to America was ever going to appear, this was the moment. Every condition was pushed to its extreme. The ocean was as low as it would go. The shelf was as bare as it would ever be. And still, at its very closest point, Santarosae still stood at least 6 to 8 kilometers away from the mainland, across nothing but open water. 6 kilometers is nothing to a ferry. It is a wall to a person on foot, and it never once went away. That number is the measured part, traced back through survey data and coastal reconstruction. The conclusion is what the number forces. No land bridge, not at the peak of the Ice Age. Not before, not ever, in the whole history of these islands. It is worth sitting with that for a moment, because it removes an entire category of explanation from the table in one stroke. Every comfortable story about the first Americans has them walking. Across a bridge, down a corridor, over the ice, always on foot. Walking is what the textbooks were built for. It is slow, it is visible, and it leaves things behind to find. The bones in Arlington Canyon cannot be reached by walking. Not on their best day, and not in their coldest century either. So the question the find asks is not the one everybody argues about. It is not who arrived in America first. The question is how a human being crossed several kilometers of cold Pacific water 13,000 years ago and lived to stand there. Not swam. The water is cold enough to end a swimmer long before the far shore turns from a smudge into a place. Something floated. Something was built, or bound, or hollowed out by hands on purpose, by people with a destination already in mind. And that is a technology. Not a lucky log. A vessel, and the knowledge of currents, weather, and where the land is. Wood does not survive 13,000 years in this climate. Reed does not. Hide does not. The boats are simply gone. So the boat is invisible and the person is not. The bones are the evidence that the boat existed at all. This is one of archaeology's strangest moves, and it is legitimate. The effect survives, so the cause must have been there. A man reached an island that was never connected to anything. Therefore, 13,000 years ago, people on this coast had boats. That single inference lands on a debate that has been running, loudly and honestly, for decades among the people who study this. Because if the first Americans could handle water here, at the very edge of their known world, then water changes absolutely everything. It stops being a barrier on the map and starts being a road, and roads run in directions nobody had mapped. The continent stops being a locked door with one narrow key and starts being a long coast with an open, unguarded edge. And that is where the science splits, cleanly and openly, into two camps that have not stopped arguing about it since. Relic States follows the questions that refuse to close, the ones the evidence keeps prying back open. If that is worth following, subscribe. The first camp looks at the ocean and sees the obvious road, the one that was always there and never froze shut. The idea even has a name that sounds like a highway, because a highway is exactly what it proposes, the Kelp Highway. Along the whole Pacific Rim, cold water grows kelp forests, and kelp forests are among the richest habitats anywhere in the ocean. Fish, shellfish, seals, sea otters, birds, a coastal larder that runs, more or less unbroken, all the way from Asia around to America. The idea is simple and rather beautiful. People with boats follow that larder south, and the larder quietly delivers them a continent. No ice sheet to cross, no corridor to wait on for centuries, just a coastline that feeds a traveler the whole way down. And the Channel Islands sit exactly where that road would have run, at the point where it brushes the coast of Southern California. A crossing to Santarosae is not a great leap of faith for people whose ordinary working life already happens on the water. For that camp, Arlington Springs man is not an anomaly at all. He is a passenger who happened to get preserved. The second camp looks inland at the ice and at a story that dominated American archaeology for most of a century. Two great ice sheets covered the north. Where they met, and where they later parted, a passage is thought to have opened up. The ice-free corridor. A long inland gap running south between walls of ice, from the far north into the open continent. It is a powerful image, and it held the textbooks for generations, because it explained everything with nothing more than people walking. Here is where honesty matters most, and where a great deal of internet confidence goes badly wrong, in both directions at once. The corridor has not been disproved, it has not been demolished, refuted, or embarrassed out of the field by anybody. What it has done is shift in status. Once the only answer on the table, it is now one candidate among several. And the Kelp Highway has not been proved either. It is a hypothesis. A strong one, certainly, but carrying a real burden. Its burden is that most of its evidence is under the sea. The Ice Age coast is drowned, and drowned sites are brutally hard. So both camps are arguing partly from what is missing, which is why the argument is still alive and still fair. Into that honest stalemate walks a claim that sounds like a verdict, and it travels much farther than either camp does. The claim is that ancient DNA has settled the route, that the genomes came back from the laboratory and pointed along the coast. It is repeated with enormous confidence in retelling after retelling of this story, and it is simply not what the genomes say. Two skeletons anchor that claim. Both are real, both were genuinely sequenced, and both are genuinely important. The claim on top is not. The first is the Anzac child, an infant buried in Montana, associated with Clovis, whose genome was published in 2014. The second is Kennewick Man, another ancient American skeleton, and far better known, whose genome followed a year later, in 2015. What those genomes proved is genuinely large, and it is not about roads at all. It is about who these people actually were. The Anzac child is a direct genetic ancestor of living Native Americans, sitting closer to Central and South American groups than Northern ones. Kennewick Man sits closer to living Native Americans than to any other population on Earth. Not a stranger at all, an ancestor. That is a finding with teeth. It ended a long, ugly argument about whether the first Americans were somebody else entirely. These were not a lost race, not a vanished people replaced by later arrivals. They are the ancestors of the people here now. And now the retellings skip. Neither paper draws a conclusion about the route, neither one, not in a line. The question of coast versus corridor is not raised in either abstract. It was simply not the question those studies set out to ask. Because DNA cannot carry a map. A genome records descent, not itinerary. It says whose child you are, not which way you came. These genomes tell us whose ancestors these were. They do not tell us how those ancestors got here. Two different questions. Mixing the two is an easy mistake, and it flatters everyone who makes it. It turns an open argument into a solved one. Solved arguments make better headlines than open ones. But the coast and the corridor are both still sitting there on the table. And this island sits awkwardly in the middle of all of it, because these bones answer one question and flatly refuse another. The femurs in Arlington Canyon prove that somebody crossed open water here 13,000 years ago. That much is not negotiable at all. They do not prove that everybody else came that way. One crossing is not a migration route. It is one crossing, nothing more. It shows the technology existed on this coast at that time, which is a real contribution to the argument, and a modest one. And the evidence that could actually settle it, the two camps agree on this much at least, is not on the island at all. It is underwater. The whole coastline these people actually walked is somewhere out there, under the Pacific, and has been for millennia. When the ice melted, the water went back where it came from, and it did not stop at the modern shore. Santarosae came apart. The low ground between the four islands flooded, and the single landmass broke into the chains seen today. Everything that ever stood on that low ground, every camp, every hearth, every landing place, went under the water with it. If people lived on this coast in boats, they lived at the water's edge, because that is where the boats are. And the water's edge of that world is now a drowned shelf out there, dark, silted over, and very largely unsearched. So the richest part of the record is not lost by accident. It is lost by geography, in a predictable direction. The evidence that would settle the Kelp Highway is exactly the evidence that the Kelp Highway's own ocean came back and took first. Which leaves only the high ground, the parts of the old islands still standing above water, holding whatever happened to be uphill. Arlington Canyon is high ground. That accident of elevation is the only reason the man is here to be argued about at all. He was not found because anyone was clever. He was found because a gully cut backwards into the hill and exposed him. And that same gully is still cutting today. Erosion is not a historical event on these islands. It is simply the weather. Rain runs, Banks collapse, the sea takes the cliffs, and the island quietly edits its own archive without asking anyone's permission. Every winter, the island offers something up and destroys something else, and there is no way on Earth to know the ratio. Or caught two femurs in the narrow window between exposure and destruction. That window is measured in seasons, not in centuries. Which raises a question nobody can answer. How many others were in that wall before 1959 and simply washed away? And it explains the honest smallness of what is actually held in the museum today, which deserves saying plainly, without decoration. Two thigh bones, one unidentified fragment, left where it lay. That is the entire physical person after 13,000 years of waiting. The name says man, and even that has not held still. The reading has moved more than once over the decades. First a man, then, on a later specialist's reading published in the 2000s, possibly a woman, then back toward male again. That last reversal rests on a secondary account rather than a report anyone here has opened, so it stays flagged, not settled. Sex is read from the skull and the pelvis. This skeleton has neither. The name is a habit, not a finding. So the oldest well-dated American anyone has is, in the most literal sense available, two legs and one very open question. And these islands were never empty, before or after, which is the part the wilder stories always manage to leave out. There is no lost race here, no giants, no sunken civilization waiting somewhere off the Californian coast to be discovered by anyone. The Channel Islands are the homeland of the Chumash, whose descendants live on this coast today and have never left it. The Chumash carry their own account of where their people come from, held and told among themselves as their own cultural memory. That account belongs to them on their terms, and it is not on trial in a laboratory or in this story. The claims here come from archaeology, and they answer to archaeology. Two lines running beside each other, neither needing the other's permission. And both of them, in their own way, are older than the argument about who was allowed to be here first. So the story comes back around to where it started, to the strip of moving water between an island and a shore. The same channel, the same swell, the same cold gap that never once closed in the whole history of these islands. 13,000 years ago, someone looked across it from one side, and then was on the other side. That is the whole finding. The boat is gone. The route is still argued. The name on the museum label may be wrong. The crossing happened anyway. And the water that never once let anyone walk here is now quietly taking back the ground that proved anyone ever came. The canyon wall is a few seasons of rain from being somewhere else, and the shelf offshore keeps its own inventory. How many crossings the sea has already erased, on this coast and on every coast like it, nobody can honestly say. The island still holds a little of it. The ocean holds the rest, and it has never been asked a question it answers.